Yeah, thank you very much, Tristan. Indeed, in the interest of an open forum, I don't want to take too much of your time. So I'll just basically give you a quick overview of some of what I've been able to single out from these exciting mornings of, and even afternoons of working with the RDS and listening to what it can do. So while this presentation will be a bit in the style of what can the RDS do for us, I'm very well prepared to expect that an answer might be the way JFK would have put it. What can what can we do for RDS in terms of even developing its functionalities or even understanding better our mutual needs? So as Tristan mentioned, much of my work has to do with taking the existing and ongoing and even established projects of the Hertziana that had to deal with some form of data and actually give them structure, give them linking, give them common model. And that's basically a lot of what I have been doing over this past few months. Part of it has been me going to the project leads and try to understand how they work, and part has been them coming to me and understanding whether what I do could be of any use to them. And what came out of this is a scenario that is indeed quite diverse, because again, the Hertziana has had a long history of many scholars and researchers. And throughout history, of course, it also means technologies have been very diverse and evolving. And with them, so have the editorial workflows. I'm saying this especially because I want to stress the aspect of editorial workflows, because some of them are rather new, if you will, and they can pretty much be molded at this stage, which is where I'm probably more interested in basically trying to look into an adoption of RDS local as a first instance, but others are pretty much set in their ways. And my goal here is also not to disrupt existing long-running editorial workflows, but still try to get the most of them by making those non-linked data into proper linked data and being part of one knowledge graph. So the ideal situation for me would be to have the Hertziana as a, if you will, a single provider of knowledge about art history, because it does have it. Throughout an endpoint, which is the usual technical endpoints through which you serve knowledge graphs, Sparkle, URL resolution, but these have to come from many projects all together. And some of these projects have already established editorial workflows using different tools. For one thing, the photographic library, which Tristan mentioned, has been long working with native XML databases and related form in ExistDB and the like. And that is something you don't just want to disrupt from one day to the next. And also, it is important to note that, again, as Tristan mentioned, we don't just deal with cultural heritage. In fact, the main primary mission is not so much cultural heritage insofar as we are a research institution, but it's our history. So from another point of view, we need to work with a more articulated and possibly complex formal model than what usual cultural heritage gives us. And this is exemplified, for example, in the Zucchero system, which is actually a long-running database of content and information data about our history that is currently mostly exposed through its portal. And it's been one of my challenges to bring it into part of this art history knowledge graphs. But there is more. There are projects that actually use ECDB, like we saw in Matteo's example yesterday. Others that use online spreadsheets, and then there's a process of converting the content of those spreadsheets into something that can become nodes in a WordPress installation. Now, again, my goal in all this is to try and be as little disruptive as possible with those editorial workflows, but benefit from the fact that everything comes into one knowledge graph, and basically try to avail ourselves of the the standard aspects of what RDS can give us. Now, I'm going to show you quickly. I have currently re-engineered some of these projects into project data into RDF graphs. It's currently loaded into GraphDB. Now, I'm showing you a local instance because currently there are some technical issues with the network of the Hertziana being re-engineered, but I can assure you it's also on the Hertziana as well. So I have a GraphDB instance that is where I'm trying to get close to 10 million RDF triples, and that's currently organized into graphs. So it has a named graph structure that reflects pretty much the projects that I'm gradually bringing in. So Zucchero, the photographic library, Skedenoag, and more are to come. I have been using this organization of content in named graph per project, well, because it's quite usual and somehow allows an informal understanding of the provenance of data. But then when you actually go look at them, at the content, what has been done so far, these 8 odd million triples, is largely within the remit of SEDOC CRM. So the lion's share here is taken by cultural heritage element, but something is picking up already. Terms from the extensions of SEDOC CRM, such as the digitization ones and the social ones, will pick up, and some terminologies and types and classes that are bespoke from the Bibliotheca Hertziana, such as the functional classification of buildings, for one thing. It's already something that delves a little more into art history. One thing I'd like to note, what I'm showing you here is GraphDB. The choice of this particular graph database is not set in stone, it's not final, but it's also not a random one. And hopefully the reason for that will come later. And now to the question how I have been working to create these several millions of RDF triples is I've been doing it programmatically. Lots of Python scripting, which is probably not particularly of particular public interest because it's specific to this job. But I would like to actually see to what extent we can work with more standardized ways of re-engineering. And I've been looking into some of them. And I've been looking into those lately that are supported by the RDS. Now, what is the problem here? That not everything can be quite easily converted into RDF with simple heuristics that you would put in the hands of something like X3ML, as was showcased yesterday, or maybe OpenRefine. This is pretty much a naive assumption I'm making, but what we are seeing here to the left is an excerpt from the raw export of the photographic library. So basically, we have XML data natively in XML, you could say, uses a terminology for tags and elements here. There's A3100, which comes from a very specific vocabulary, which is the Marburg Midas vocabulary. Under all these are hide things like role, title, name, and that sort of things. And then, of course, you can see the actual values are often encoded in German, except for the names, perhaps. And then there are links formalized in a rather non-standard way to the GND, to the AKL. Now, this is not the main problem for me as an engineer of knowledge. The main problem is in some nuances that express the interpretation that the person who entered this data gave in order to reflect their way of thinking into the model. So this is, for example, an object that in the person who entered its mind, in their minds, said that meant that it might have been created by either Giovan Francesco da Sangallo or Bastiano da Sangallo. So it's an either-or relationship expressed in this rather non-standard way You won't even find it even in the MITRE specification. And it's a positional way to say the other. Now, the way this would convert into RDF to the right, if you were to respect the ontological conventions that I will give you, you would have to create a lot of statements. You would have to create a specific class for that which could be either of these sangallos, and then an instance for one of them, the generic one of them, for a member of this class, and then you had to connect the participation in the creation of this object to this not better defined instance. So there's a lot to create that it's quite hard to put in the hands of something that is not procedural as a Python. Similarly, there are here below other ways for the inputter to express maybe that they were not sure which virtuous solis, whether it's the elder one or the younger one, to have created another item, and whether the title is not, this is title A5200, is not known, and whether it's 3 dots. All this is pretty much non-standards. For some of it, you can have heuristics, but for some of it, I would be more keen, and maybe others were, to keep the procedural aspects. So keep having Python code synchronizing the one data source with the knowledge graph. So the question is whether this should work complete independently or RDS, or whether we could think of ways for more procedural methods of re-engineering data to work alongside the ones provided by RDS, such as the interoperability with OpenRefine. Another aspect I would like to discuss with you today is this has come has been brought to my attention by several scholars here in the Hertziana. So RDS is primarily a platform for managing research data, and they would say the richer the data set itself, the more you can express with it. But one important aspect is the ability for these data to lend themselves to diachronic studies. So having data that evolve in time. Now, typically one thing you want to show is the aggregation of data. And this typically in a map, for example, it's here, but a dynamic map that basically, let's say, that basically shows the evolution, for example, of sacred places of churches in a town over time. Now, this is not just a question of maps, a question also of having the data represented in a evolving and diachronic way. But it's also subordinated to the ability of the platform to, take slices of these aggregated data and show them accordingly. So snapshot and a given instant. This is not something we would just want to do because we want to make diachronic studies, show how data evolve on a map, which I see the platform, the RDS, is giving you a map as a tool. It's not just for that reason, but think about publications, okay? Publications that are complemented with data. And what you do want is you want to have a snapshot of those data as, persistent and available and unmutable for the benefit of that publication, because it was referencing data as well at a certain point in time, and you want that to be set in stone. Now, typically, journals will tell us, just go repository, just put that snapshot of data into, and that's as persistent as it can be. But I've been wondering whether we couldn't have this actually at the level of the original data platform. So my question here is whether RDS would be a good platform for actually immortalizing snapshots of our data. You might argue here that the ability to create snapshots of a certain point in time they depend on the ontology you use. If the underlying model supports the evolution of data in time, then you just write a query on them and, take just data you need. yes, that is true. But there's also some support that has been given by the most recent technologies in linked data and RDF. And one of these is actually RDF Star and Sparkle Star. And these are new standards that allow you to basically attach statements to statements. So you can basically say any fact that is expressed in your knowledge base has a certain, for example, validity in time, has a certain authorship. You can use that as a meta-level representation of your data. Now, why GraphDB? Well, GraphDB has now support for RDF Star and Sparkle Star, is one of those that can do it. So if I wanted to actually manage evolving data in this way, I could do it. And as we know, Blaze Graph is catching up with this in a release candidate that might come out at some point as a full release, but we don't really know. But the important thing is that whichever the support in the underlying database is, whether it can be encoded and made available in RDS, it might as well be that you're going to tell me today, well, it's a Sparkle query engine. If you can formulate and validate the query in Sparkle Star, then it's just a matter of whether the underlying database server would do it for you. So I'm interested actually in discussing this aspect. And then finally, like I said, we're trying to build an art history system here. And it also means that the model has to be a little more complex than working with the standard issue entities of cultural heritage. So in that regard, we have seen examples of how to create form templates for persons, places, built works, artworks. We would need to be a lot more, let's say, formal and specific to that. Ideally, in art history, you want to model things like techniques, the style currents over time, the roles that determine, for example, who paid for a monument and who actually commissioned it and that sort of thing. So interactions and roles that would be interesting for us to be able to model formally as we would a person, place, or an artwork, types of process, all these things. So what I'd like to figure out basically is whether we can have such an extended model templated on one instance of the RDS local, for one thing. But then the question is, what if I wanted to make this model available to all the leads of those projects who basically I would like to onboard onto RDS? So basically, let them use their own workflows, work as much as they can with the RDS local, but try and work with a shared understanding of a formal model of art history, which then they will implement to their liking with the data they have. And to do that, how many RDSs do I need? So ideally, it would be important for us to have like one RDS local where this model templating is implemented and have them work with that. And then, give the researchers the ability to shape up their own projects. And it seems to me that the way you would do it on RDS, on a local RDS, is by configuring repositories for each of these researchers and then apps to actually showcase them and build up the projects. Or would I have to actually create one RDS local instance for each of them? And what are the pros and cons of adopting either approach if both approaches are possible? Remember that in the second case, you of course would need to be doing more data integration if you want to make sure everything flows into the one knowledge graph that I'm building. So I've given you now quite a bit of the issues and concerns and interests and possible challenges that have arisen in doing this week of working with the RDS, and hopefully there'll be food for good discussion and hopefully answer some more questions. So that would be it from my side of the presentation.